President of Pune International Center. He has dedicated his life to scientific innovation, research, and policy making. Throughout his illustrious career, he has authored around 25 books, published 284 research papers, and has been awarded 52 honorary doctorates from universities worldwide. Beyond academia, he has played a pivotal role in shaping India's science and technology policies. Having chaired 12 high powered Mashelkar committees and served on the Scientific Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, his exceptional contributions to the scientific research, public policy, and innovation have earned him numerous prestigious awards, including the Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and Padma Vibhushan. As an international recognition, such as Business Week Star of Asia and the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, Dr. Mashelkar is only the third Indian engineer to be inducted as a Fellow of the Royal Society in UK and the first Indian to be elected as the Fellow of the National Academy Inventors US. It is an absolute honor to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mashelkar to deliver the inaugural address. I would now like to invite Dr. Mashelkar on this dais.
प्रोफेसर अमिताभ मलिक, मराठीत ज्याला आपण करता करविता म्हणतो आजच्या कार्यक्रमाचे, माय एस्टीम फ्रेंड डॉक्टर माधव गाडगीळ, champion of earth, Madhav. There are several other friends. I don't want to go through all the names. Team EECC, particularly I want to mention, who has put every ounce of energy in organizing this wonderful event. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very special day, Women's Day, as we all celebrate, but also a very special day for Pune International Center, because this auditorium was formally inaugurated on the 5th with Pandit Kasharkarji giving an illuminating sort of performance. But this is the first technical program in this particular auditorium, and I'm sure as time goes on, we'll be having hundreds and thousands of them. So welcome to this very, very special morning indeed. We are particularly proud that PIC has its own home now, something that we are very, very proud indeed. And as I had mentioned when we inaugurated the campus, that we have what you might like to call as an intellectual hub here. Madhav, I just mentioned on that day that if you just see dozens of institutions in a few square kilometers here, but you just go across and you see ICER, you see NCL next to each other. Do you know these two institutions together, how many PhDs they have per year? 1,200 PhDs. Can you just imagine what sort of intellectual fervor this place is going to create? So one feels very, very special indeed today. As we know, PIC, as you entered, you saw it is all about churning ideas and building our futures. And we are concerned with one of the greatest challenges that humanity has faced in its history. There is no exaggeration when I say that we are standing at the precipice of a defining moment in human history. Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It is our present reality. The floods, the wildfires, the droughts, the hurricanes. This is not a future scenario. This is happening right now as we speak. The climate emergency is no longer just an academic debate, a policy discussion, or an activist slogan. It is a planetary crisis, and the clock is ticking. So, Amita, I must congratulate you for using the word emergency. You didn't say urgency, you said emergency. And that's what we are at. We are indeed running out of time. There's an African proverb that says that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. But what have you done instead? We have cut the trees down, and Madhav knows about it and has championed it for decades now. We have paved our forests, pumped out, sky is full of carbon, all in the name of progress. And now, as the planet burns, as ice caps melt, as species vanish before our eyes, we are left scrambling for solutions that should have been implemented decades ago. Let me be blunt. This is not just a crisis of nature. This is a crisis of leadership. Why do I say that? The policies are being rolled back. The reckless denial of science, and I know you know who I'm talking about, the short-term political games, these are not just inconvenient setbacks. They are crimes against the future. President Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Trump 1, Trump 2, twice. The world just didn't lose a signature on the treaty. It lost time. It lost momentum. It lost moral leadership. The reality is this: the earth does not need saving. We do. The planet will survive in some form or the other long after we are gone. It has withstood ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes. What is at stake is not the survival of the earth, it's the survival of humanity as we know it today. And yet here we are, acting as if it is kind of a distant, slow-moving catastrophe. By 2050, sea levels will rise. By 2070, extreme heat waves will be warm. By 2100, the Arctic may be ice-free, etc. We are looking into the future. But ladies and gentlemen, the crisis is now. Last year, parts of the world hit 53 degrees centigrade, unlivable temperatures. Farmers in some regions are seeing 90% crop failure due to drought. Wildfires have reached places that have never burned before. And still, we negotiate as if nature is going to wait. Nature is not negotiating with us. We have seen countries set net zero targets for 2050, 2060, 2070, as if we have the luxury of time, as if the climate crisis is politely waiting for us to get our act together. I'm sorry, that is wrong. And that is where institutions like Pune International Center must lead the way, have been leading the way. Amitav, thanks to your leadership and your wonderful EECC group, which has done a fantastic work. Let me say a few words. For over a decade, PIC has been at the forefront of climate action, not just through research, not just through policy, but through real, tangible, actionable change. From our early efforts in climate literacy, I remember those days, Amitav, when we started by just creating awareness. That is how we started. That was the first step in a 1,000-mile journey. And sustainable urban planning to our ambitious push for decarbonization of the Pune metropolitan region, that is PMR, we have never wavered in our mission. When we launched the Pathway to Rapid Decarbonization report in 2020, we did so with conviction that India must not just meet global climate goals, but set the gold standard for how sustainable development should be done. And despite the world shutting down during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm very proud, PIC did not stop. While many were waiting for the world to return to normal, we doubled down, creating a groundbreaking TechFin feasibility report proving that PMR could achieve net carbon neutrality by 2030. This was not just theory, it was a roadmap for action. And we proved something remarkable. Carbon emissions in PMR by 2030 can be lower than in 2020. That means despite population growth, despite urban expansion, despite economic pressures, we can bend the carbon curve. That is why PIC has not stopped at policy. We have gone further, piloting microgrid technologies for 24 into 7 renewable energy access, demonstrating how states like Maharashtra can pole vault into a future powered by clean distributed energy. And we are not waiting for change. We are trying to build it ourselves. And we must go further. And so we look ahead. PIC is stepping up again, building renewable energy capacity for India's energy independence by 2047. Because true independence, ladies and gentlemen, is not just political. It is freedom from fossil fuels. It is freedom from pollution. It is freedom from the stranglehold of unsustainable industries. Pune, and I must say, for Pune International Center, we are creating special centers like on sustainable mobility and so on and so forth. This is not the time to go over everything that PIC is doing, but I thought I'll give you a glimpse very proudly of what we have done so far. To me, Pune is not just a thought, but as an action leader, not only in policy, but also in technology, in social innovation, etc., to combat climate change. So as a scientist and technologist, I must talk a little bit about what Pune is doing, some highlights of the science and technology advances that we are making to combat climate change. On 28th February 2024, which happened to be the Science Day, our Honorable Prime Minister launched a catamaran built by Cochin Shipyard, a ferry carrying 50 passengers. It has the indigenous hydrogen proton exchange membrane cell technology developed by our NCL and KPIT technologies. I'm very proud to say, in performance, it is ahead of the world, and in cost, it is a fraction of global benchmarks. I always talk about affordable excellence. This is a classical case of affordable excellence. What does that mean? So under the Harinauka initiative of Government of India, all the Indian waterways can be made green by using this technology. And indeed, India can be world leader in greening world's waterways. I think this is extremely important, leadership, not just following. That is my paid theme. I remember in 2000, we created this new Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative. Leadership was in capital letters. And that is where these fuel cell programs were launched. And it was risk-taking because Indian industry always worked in areas where technology was known, markets were known, play safe. We went into areas where technologies were unknown and markets were unknown. Real risk. That time, nobody talked about fuel cells. We went into that at that time, That was the risk-taking. And you can see now the results. Look at Praj, for example, world's leading biofuel company. It is a world leader in second-generation bioethanol plants with imprint in more than 100 countries. We should be proud of that. Green hydrogen is going to be the future. This is not yet public knowledge, but I'm just happy to share that there were green hydrogen valley projects from different cities. And I'm very proud to say that the Pune Green Hydrogen Valley project proposal was ranked as the best last month and has been funded under MNRE in its National Green Hydrogen Mission, something that we should be very proud of, basically. And I must congratulate Pune Knowledge Cluster, Dr. Ashish Lele, who provided the leadership. What is special about this? Because when you talk about green hydrogen, it's not just its production, it's not just its storage, it's its committed use. That is where green hydrogen has been stuck. Now, if you see this particular project, it is end-to-end. so as to say. What is remarkable is that, we always complain about private sector not taking the lead, private sector not putting in money, etc. As you know, India's investment have been 0.64%, 0.7% to 0.64% is the progress we have made during the last decade, out of which two-thirds come from the government, one-third from the private sector. I'm very happy to say, in this particular project, it is exactly the reverse. Two-thirds is coming from private sector. Private sector is taking a lead in Pune in this particular project. And its potential impact is huge because, for example, we have in Kurkum the fine chemicals, specialty chemicals industry, and they will have to go green in order to be able to export. And they have to use green hydrogen for reduction, for example. General Patankar, our share in these multi-billion dollar sort of specialty chemicals is just 2%. We can raise it to 20% if we go green. Can you see the export potential? So I think the pointers that I'm giving to you are ones which are game changers. That's what Pune is doing. And finally, the challenge of availability of lithium, whose supply is controlled by China. KPIT technology has developed sodium-ion batteries that are state-of-the-art and will take care of national security concerns. And here is where the government of India, that was a particular fund that they have created for supporting private sector is very, very important, because normally the labs get stuck on TRL, technology readiness level, from 1 to 3, 4, and then there is a big gap, and industry wants TRL 9. That particular gap has to be filled. This technology is at TRL 7. You can see with this such funds coming in where we can. So I would say, ladies and gentlemen, that PIC is showing leadership in climate policy research. Pune institutions and industry together are showing leadership in technological innovation. And as a Punekar, as a Puneite, I feel very proud. Let me end with the theme of this conference once again, the climate emergency conference. I remember I was the president of Indian National Science Academy, and I pulled out my records. On 9 June 2007 in Delhi, there was this Blackett Memorial Oration that was given. You know by whom? Lord Martin Rees, the president of Royal Society. And you know what was the title? The title was The Last Century. Will the civilization survive the 21st century? 2007, there were early warnings that were issued by the president of Royal Society. And what are we doing 17 years later, 18 years later? We are discussing the same challenge that we have. So I would like to conclude by saying the following. There will be discussions, there will be deliberations. I determine the success of any deliberation in terms of the new idea that emerge, not revigorating the same ideas over and again, same statistics. I mean, you go to Google and you will get all the statistics. But how do we do things differently? So, Ajit, Sir Francis Bacon has said that when you want to achieve results which have not been achieved before, it is an unwise fancy to think that they can be achieved by using the methods that have been used before. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that is the onus of these deliberations. What is the fresh thinking we do? All right, so that we can deal with this conference. So it's not about thinking smart, but thinking differently, acting fast. And again, Amitav, thank you for reminding us, one planet, one chance. We have to seize that chance. Thank you very much.
I would like to invite Professor Malik to provide Dr. Mashelkar with a token of appreciation.
And laptop. I'll go up and start my talk. Hopefully. Laptop. हाँ, चलो.
Invite करते हैं, म्हणजे I'll give you introduction. Next, we have our very own Professor Amitav Malik, a distinguished scientist and a thought leader who is very eager to talk about why this conference is crucial than ever. Professor Malik, a Padma Shri awardee, was a key figure in advancing India's indigenous laser technology and led the establishment of Laser Science and Technology Center under DRDO. Today, he serves as a conference convener, founding trustee of Pune International Center, and head of our very own Energy, Environment, and Climate Change Cell, where he spearheads climate resilience and sustainability initiatives. I now invite Professor Amitav Malik to share his insights on why the Climate Emergency Conference.
Namaskar and greetings of the Women's International Day or International Day for Women. So let me add 2 words to Dr. Vashilkar. Half the population of this world has been neglected so far. We are only now waking up to realize, my God, what a loss, what injustice. So I hope this is the beginning of a change. Very similar is the story of the climate change. Our generation, I think most of us, somewhere near 80 plus, I don't remember drinking water from bottle, buying water. Huh? This is only 70 years ago, 60 years ago. How many things have changed? Which means what? Which means we did not care, and therefore things have changed. Or somebody else cared for something else. That also is a reason. So climate change, global warming, is that kind of a story. If you don't mind, I'll sit down and continue here. If you recall, most of us old enough will recall that our first Conference of Parties summit meeting on the global warming and climate change was in 1991 in Rio, Brazil. I was that time in Washington, and so I was also kind of involved. But a lot of promises came up, a lot of enthusiasm came out, a lot of air travels gave out additional CO2 in the atmosphere. Having said that, the aims set by the first Rio summit was to contain CO2 increase and reduce it to 30% by 2011, 10 years from 1991. We all know nothing of that sort happened, and it is going on increasing. So obviously, the question comes why? I think maybe most of us have heard of it and know of it. But for the record, let me say that burning fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas, whatever, has been the norm. Infrastructure has been set. And therefore, there is a major force, if I may call, for, for people to not move away from that comfort zone. Everything is going on very well. Why are you complaining? That is how global warming and climate change have started happening. In fact, if I recall, it was the fear of global warming that preceded the fear of climate catastrophe. But in the new millennium, 2001, we started feeling that climate is changing. And now we are come to a stage where I, as a climate activist, PIC as a very conscientious, independent think tank, have agreed to call a conference on climate emergency. Is this on online? Projection is on? No. So I'm not following the net meeting, but I will use the PPT more for my own continuity. The fossil fuel burning has been growing exponentially. It's an industry. It was making money. It was creating huge dependence of the entire population of the world on fossil fuel. They are justified in their own objective. They were aware, now of course the documents are coming out, that by 1955 and 1960, Exxon and others were, their scientists were also working. They were worried about the court cases that might happen. So they were extremely aware that this is going to lead into an unacceptable situation where the global warming and climate change will be so badly affected that people might sue them. That is happening. Now, of course, it's long time since all that started. Greta Thunberg happened. A girl of hardly 15 who understood that her future is gone. There are many young in India today, they are understanding that what's happening. There is nothing. No, there will be no job, no opportunity, no nothing. It will be just a struggle for existence. Yesterday we held a student mela, kind of climate mela, we call it You Can, because we wanted to inculcate in the students, college students, school students, the awareness that you yourself can make a difference. We cannot hold the governments, we cannot hold the leaders. We have to hold ourselves responsible because it is we, the people, who select the leaders, who select the government, and so on and so forth. What does climate emergency mean? Why are we calling it? Emergency means that we are heading for things that are much worse than today. What's the worse than today? More of the climate extremes, more of the climate uncertainty, weather uncertainties. So I'd invited my colleague, Dr. Krishnan, to relate weather and climate. I think, is there already? Oh, there you go. So he's going to do that for us and understand that how day-to-day life, which we call weather, is getting affected by climate, which is a long-term perspective. We are in the process of what we have not done so far. Accumulated CO2 or greenhouse gases have totaled to something like over 580 gigaton in the atmosphere. We are talking about, not we, the Western countries are talking about technology solutions. Yes, of course, technology solutions are there and they will improve. But the scale of it is so large. The cost of it will be so large. It's almost like being unviable. So that is where the reason why we are talking about climate emergency. There is a need for comprehensive emission mapping. We know that we are the third largest GHG emission. China, which was the second, has now become the topmost. USA is number two. Russia has remained on number four. But if you see the differences in number one, number two, and number three, major differences. We are only 7% of the total responsibility. Having said that, given our population, I'm afraid slowly we may become the second largest polluter, the invisible GHG polluter. I'm not talking about visible pollution. They are two different things. They both are injurious, both are dangerous, both need to be controlled. But right now, what we are talking about is global warming and climate change, which is largely due to greenhouse gases trapped in the atmosphere. We very easily say that climate change and global warming are universal, global. So they are not partial, they are totally impartial. And at one point, I myself was saying that this can emerge as a global equalizer. Everything will be heard, and therefore there will be some kind of sharing of the misery, sharing of the problems. Further study shows that the really wealthy Western countries are already gearing up to 2100, year 2100, so that they can live more or less the same pattern of life for another 70 years, or whatever it is. And by that time, they are also hoping that technology will make tremendous jumps. They are also hoping that today we are talking about one planet, one chance. They are looking at planet two, possible. Given the humankind innovative capacity and the humankind reach of thought, anything is possible. And yet, unless there is action, unless there is momentum, nothing much happens. That's the tragedy of the climate change and global warming. Another interesting aspect is why there is no action. Not that action is very difficult, not that action is very expensive. They're all there, but just not happening. Why? Because urgency is not being felt. And somebody will accuse me of being antisocial or activist. Actually, we have become victims of what is called next quarter profit. Everything is decided by the next quarter profit by the corporate. But then who is causing it? People, society. So unless we get rid of this next quarter profit syndrome, how are we going to think beyond it? That is the reason there is no action yet. There is no action yet can also be translated into there is not enough momentum for feel the pinch. The political leaders or decision makers are yet not understanding that the cost of no action will be multiple times the cost of action. When it is related to cost, maybe some sense will emerge. Today, there are numbers, figures all over in all documents. They are saying roughly cost of not doing enough in the next 2 years, we are already into 2025, will cost 7 times the cost of damage by 2030. Today's cost of damage is already calculated. I don't remember it offhand, but that will be multiplied by whatever number, and the cost of not doing will be 7 times more than the cost that will be there anyway. Some damage will be there. The people are talking about loss and damage. That's accepted. But the scale of and cost, that is going to be very different. There are many things I don't know. The purpose of this climate emergency conference is to make us think that ultimately it is the modern society capable of innovative thinking, capable of actually making a difference, that has to become active and proactive. And whatever we are doing in this so-called conference is actually to not only provide directions, not only provide pathways, but also do what you can in your own surrounding, in your own city, in your own country, and so on and so forth. In 2012, we held a conference, first conference on energy, environment, and national security. Dr. Kalam had come from Delhi, and he said to me, because he was my boss and senior, so like Dr. Mashilkar also tells me so many wonderful guideline things. He said, Amitabh, you want to do something which is obvious, your intentions are good, but then you don't go on advising people. What you want people to do, make it happen in your city. That was the beginning of PIC taking up a flagship project on making PMR net carbon neutral by 2030. Because by 2018, IPCC had already announced that whatever we can do in the decade of 2020 to 2030 will decide what we will be doing in 2100. That was this kind of very well researched, well studied, well analyzed assessment. We followed. In PIC, we took up that project. In fact, industry got interested. We got little funding from them also. And we created a TechFin study, as we call it, technology financial study, feasibility study of many pages, 200 odd pages, to show, to prove on paper that the carbon signature of the PMR by 2030 can be less than what it was in 2020. So we are not going the emission curve. And Dr. Mashelkar mentioned that. That exists, that is being read by many across the world. I get a feedback because I'm the author. It's very heartening to know that people are really looking at understanding that unless you do your thing in your environment, why should anybody bother about it? So we have to do in our own environment what we can do. The problem is global, of course. Fortunately, solutions are all local. And when local things come together, that becomes the global solution. It is that kind of scenario that we are talking about. How do we manage the impending threat? So it's a question of vulnerability. I hope most of you know that we are one of the very vulnerable country because of our geography, because of our population, because of our inability of having adequate infrastructure. We are seventh vulnerable in the world. So therefore, we can't wait for the rest of the world to wake up and start working. And that is why we are trying to make a difference as much as possible for India to begin with. And here, I think most of you know that Basically, I'm a defense scientist involved in national security for many years. So naturally, by instinct, I go back to my originals, and I understand that as the global warming and climate change becomes more aggravated, the societal tensions will increase. The intergovernmental tensions will increase. International tensions will increase. Climate migration itself will create havoc. It will become a national security issue. Inevitable. And therefore, we have to enable ourselves so that our national security is not compromised because of some natural disaster, some other thing. Natural disaster, I'm saying because most people understand that natural disaster can affect national security. But it is that kind of a thing that we are building into it. So it is not a natural disaster. It is a kind of a disaster that man-made and man-developed that is building up, and we are not able to do much. Fortunately for Maharashtra, there was a time when we had a very young environmental minister, Aditya Thackeray, and when we were doing all that, he was the minister. But then politics being what it is, nothing stays constant and things change. But we can't let that happen. We have to maintain momentum. That is a responsibility thing of the like-minded people who are thinking. Yesterday, I'm happy to share with you more than 500 school children participate in debate and competition and essays and all that. My God, they are width of imagination. They are an understanding of the future. I get filled up. Amazing. And it is this kind of kids who are going to face havoc. Who is responsible? Our generation. Maybe not in India so much, but all over. And this will happen to everybody. My granddaughter is 13, my grandson is 17. They're in USA. They'll face the same problem. So what are we doing? At this age, I think we can try to change as much as possible. I think I'm meandering, so I don't know what I'm saying. But there are so many things. I will share this PPT. But then humanity is indeed at a turning point. And it's not just a turning point, it's a tipping point. Environmental tipping points are those where the environmental parameters change to such an extent that they go into a regenerative feedback mode. And when that happens, things that are getting worse, they automatically get even more worse. People's intervention, human intervention becomes less and less effective. We are getting into all this slowly and steadily. IPCC has documented all this into a number of tipping points that are going to be crossed. We have already crossed some 5 or 6 major tipping points. For instance, I think Dr. Mashelkar mentioned that there are many changes that are happening. For instance, take the polar region, Arctic or Antarctic. Arctic is heated up already by 4 times. Arctic is already melting to the extent that nations are looking for waterways for transport. Antarctic is being cleaved. And at the rate that Antarctic is falling out, and it might happen any day without anybody's notice, the sea level rise would be in terms of meters, not in just centimeters. Bangladesh is, and even West Bengal, the western, sorry, the Bay of Bengal is heating up at 3 degrees per year instead of 2 degrees per year. Because wherever there is a containment of water, that heating is coming cumulative. So every geography, every place, every situation is going to get aggravated in terms of being human friendly. What we took for granted in our childhood, we never bothered. But now all those things are now becoming inevitable. So the parts of the earth that will become uninhabitable will go on increasing to the extent that habitable portions will become very rare and there will be tension, there will be migration. This is the situation that seems almost inevitable in the next 25 years. In the next 25 years, God forbid, either we act on things or we perish. That is the situation we are talking about. Once again, I'm deviating from what is there on the thing. But fortunately today, not fortunately, but luckily, today the economy is getting hurt because of the climate change. Not just because there are losses, but the whole functioning of economy has been affected by the way the nature is responding. And we are very lucky to have somebody like Dr. Anade here with us, who will tell us more. So I'll not get into it. But we know that every industry is going to lose out on productivity, on what they are measuring today as the GDP. What they're measuring today as the GDP by itself is wrong. It is not measuring any progress. It is not measuring any happiness. It is not measuring any real gain to the environment or to the earth or to the humanity. It is only measuring transfer of monetary transfer between nations in terms of making business. I'm sorry. So I think we are measuring the wrong things. PIC is going to put a very strong paper on shifting to green GDP. This has been going on for the last 5-7 years, but I think high time that somebody has to take the bull by the horn, and we hope to do that in the next few years. um, cost of inaction, I've already talked about. Humanity. Okay. Possible solutions. First of all, we need to recognize the threat. We need to understand the cause of the threat. It's a threat which is slowly building, invisibly building, without warning, without any fanfare. And then you suddenly know, oh my God, my neighborhood water level has increased. Thirdly, Miami realized last year that there were potholes. It's not potholes. What do you call? The drainage holes. Instead of draining water of the city into the sea, it is flowing water of the sea into the city. Miami sea face was supposed to be a prime property. Nobody is buying any property there. No insurance company is willing to give insurance cover. It is that kind of loss that all Western countries, all affluent countries are now feeling the pinch. And therefore, when the affluent countries feel the pinch, things start changing, I hope, but it's too late. I told you that by IPCC calculation, 1 meter rise in sea level per decade looks like inevitable from within next 20-30 years for next 100 years, which means we will definitely lose coastal areas, coastal cities. At what point will we wake up? We means the global community. If they have not yet woken up, I'm sure they will sometimes wake up in parts, in sections, and that will be the turning point. So we as the seventh vulnerable nation in the world, we have to understand that we cannot afford to wait for others to do anything else. We cannot afford to wait for politicians to change their mind. We need to understand the changes within us, changes within our thinking. Once the thinking changes, I'll take one more minute to share. In Pune, in 2005, there was a legislation by the government of Maharashtra that hill slopes, in Pune there are lots of hill slopes, that hill slopes will not be allowed for new construction anymore. Do you know? The hill slopes have become the prime construction areas. There are many hill slopes which now have 20-story buildings. And guess what? They are 20-story because the top story, which is most expensive, gets sold first. Who's responsible? The builder or the people who are buying? So it's the mindset change that is required. Unless that happens, same thing, same story will go on. So we are talking about doing something very difficult in anticipation of something becoming even more difficult. That's not human nature. We have to modify human nature as well. I think I have said enough, and I don't think this is a forum for question and answer, but if there is any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the importance and setting the background for the context. Now, our next speaker is a true legend in this field of ecology and environmental science. It is my true privilege to introduce Dr. Madhav Gadgil, a man whose contributions have profoundly influenced biodiversity conservation, environmental policy, and sustainable development. Dr. Madhav Gadgil is the founder of Center for Ecological Sciences at IISc Bangalore and an architect of the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, also known as the Gadgil Report. His groundbreaking work has helped shape India's conservation policies, bringing scientific rigor and community participation in environmental governance. And today, we are proud that his work has not just been acknowledged nationally but globally. Dr. Gadgil was recently honored with the Champions of the Earth Award by the United Nations as the highest environmental honor. Please put your hands together for the Champion of the Earth, Dr. Madhav Gadgil.
Namaskar. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of my concrete experiences. I am a field ecologist, and what I would like to talk about is what I have seen in the context of this climate emergency. And there are so many different aspects that I will have to restrict to a few major issues, which I will try to place before you. The next slide, please. So the first one is, it has been talked about a lot also here, that with the global warming, the seas are getting hotter and hotter. And although there is this enormous store of water in our world's oceans, the warming has gone to the level that the sea level temperature is increasing clearly, and there is a rise in the sea level all along, particularly in the tropics. Uh, Now that has led to very major changes in the behavior of the atmosphere over the seas. For instance, the cyclones were primarily restricted in the 1520 till 1520 years ago to the Bay of Bengal. But since then, there are there has been a shift. Of course, the Bay of Bengal cyclones continue, but a greater and greater proportion of cyclones is now being formed in the Arabian Sea. And in particular, we have supercyclonic winds, and they have earlier, they had been, when formed in the Arabian Sea, moved towards Arabia, but now some of them are coming and hitting the west coast. We had our own experiences. There was this Nisarga super cyclone in which hit Maharashtra coast, in fact, on 3rd June 2020, and Taukte in 2021 off the Maharashtra coast. And both these had major impacts. In particular, the Nisarga cyclone and its impact. I have a lot of friends in the Konkan area, especially Raigad district, where it hit the coast, and they have vividly describing how the cyclone impacted the coastal vegetation and both the natural vegetation such as mangrove as well as the coconut orchards and other man-made vegetation. Very notably, earlier the track was predicted so that Nisarga might have hit the Tarapur nuclear power station. Fortunately, that did not happen. But there was a clear threat that this is what might happen. On the west coast, we have Tarapur. Then there is also the Jaitapur nuclear facility. There are, of course, major ports such as Vasco da Gama port in Goa and the recently coming up Vizhinjam port in Kerala. Now, as time goes and as more and more super cyclones begin to hit west coast, which is certainly possible, then there is serious danger of many things, including if the nuclear power stations are affected, then there will be leakage of radioactive waste into the sea, and that will have enormous consequences for the marine environment and marine life over a long time period. And this is not just a distant possibility. It is a certainly real threat that over the next 10, 15 years, one of these power stations, nuclear power stations, will be hit by another super cyclone, the way the frequency of these super cyclones is increasing. Vasco da Gama port in Goa, now there are very interesting controversy had been going on. The port is being deepened to bring in vessels carrying coal. And the Pollution Control Board, regretfully, our pollution control boards do not generally give honest data. They are continuously manipulating data to show that pollution is far less than what it is. I have lots of concrete evidence of this, which I have documented also, including in official reports, such as Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report. But in case of Vasco da Gama, the pollution control board strongly recommended against this deepening. What happened? The government decided to neglect this. The coal is being imported at the behest of three major uh, investors in India. I need not name them. They are the three richest in the concerns, industrial, whatever, private bodies of India. So they are the ones who are interested in this coal being imported. And for what? To set up coal-based power plants on the Deccan Plateau area of Karnataka, which means that from Vasco da Gama port through to the up Ghat, there will have to be a railway line carrying the coal. The railway line is going to go through a national park. And we are talking about, and presumably the forest department is committed to protecting the natural ecosystem, the wildlife of these national parks. The national park involved in this case is Mole National Park, but forest department is keeping completely quiet. It is not protesting in any way. And the railway line is going through the national park and then climbing the hills to take, as I said, the coal to the Deccan Plateau area of Karnataka, where the coal-based power plant will be set up. This is not being done. The industrialists are certainly enormously powerful and wealthy. They are not spending a single paisa on this railway line. Government is subsidizing at our everybody's cost, the citizens' cost, the entire railway project. Some 10,000 crore rupees subsidy has been given to take the railway line. So this is the way the actual actions on ground are happening. What does this burning of coal imply? The burning of the coal implies certainly that there would be more and more of what are called aerosol particles in the atmosphere. These are small, minute particles which are responsible for what has been called the Asian brown cloud. India is clothed, covered now with an atmosphere which is laden with these aerosols and which has its own serious impacts. I will come to that. Secondly, the Vizhinjam port, for instance, there is a lot of public protest against it because of the enormous demand for rock metal and then man-made sand that the port has generated, which has led to proliferation of rock quarries in Kerala. These rock quarries have had multiple impacts. You might recall that on July 30th last year, 2024, there was this major landslide in Wayanad, which killed for the first time such a large number of people. Over 400 people died in that landslide. So people began to think about that landslide. And what is happening is that the hills, the whole Western Ghats actually from Maharashtra through Kerala, the hills have been rendered fragile by the blasting that has gone on in the enormous number, uncounted number, in fact, of rock quarries on the Western Ghats. Kerala is a state where they try to look at it. There is a official report of Kerala Legislative Assembly that 95% of the rock quarries are illegal. And they are making enormous amount of money. Very little investment is needed. Lot of profit is made. And the consequences, amongst other things, major landslides which have increased in frequency in recent years. There is good study from a group from Pune itself, which has shown that between 2010 to 2020, the frequency of landslides, not just these big ones which kill so many people, but small, medium and large landslides, has increased over 10 years by 100 folds. And it is going to increase further the way things are going. The next slide, please. Yes. So what does this carbon produced by our coal plants and carbon, the rock, minute rock particles, which are result of the rock quarry, especially they are making man-made sand by powdering the rock into fine particles. What happens? Scientific studies have shown that in aerosol-laid air, the water vapor condenses in a way that very large water droplets are formed, and that leads to intense rain over very short period. So in absence of these aerosols, what would have been happening, what would have happened is a drizzle of rain over 4 or 5 hours. Now there is an intense cloud burst and intense rain over 30 minutes or so. And this kind of intense rainfall events, which have again been rapidly increasing, has serious implications in terms of floods. The West Coast rivers are now showing increasingly major floods, and then landslides number of them has increased rapidly, as I said, between 2010 to 2020, 100-fold. And there is also breaching of bunds and collapse of buildings, which has been now, in particular in 2021, both in Konkan area and in Kerala, there was this large disasters. In Kerala in 2018 onwards, there have been floods and problems. So these are some of the ecological consequences of climate change, which is then impacts are significantly multiplied by the way the whole society, the polity, the economy handles the situation. I would like to talk about just one other aspect. Next slide, please, of climate change. These are melting of glaciers. That there is now substantial evidence, continual evidence that it's not just the melting of the Antarctic and the Arctic polar ice, but in our own Himalayas, all over, there is melting of ice. And this means that the glaciers are slowly being reduced, and with that, the water supply which comes from these glaciers to our major rivers like Ganga, Brahmaputra, and its tributaries like Gandaki and Teesta and so on, that water supply is getting affected, and slowly the rivers will have less and less water in them, which will have its own quite serious impacts. Excuse me. One of the major impacts would be in this river pollution and increasing levels of pollution, because there is less water to take off remove the pollution, flush it out of the rivers. Now, this pollution all over India is a serious problem. Almost no river in India, even the smaller rivers, are anymore free of pollution. We have our in Maharashtra, our Vithala worship and the Varkaris and uh, talking of Indrayani and Bhima and how on the banks of you have Dehu and Alandi and then Pandharpur on the banks of these rivers. What is the state of these rivers? Indrayani is now full of poisonous foam, and the famous Doha, the pool in the Indrayani river, where Sant Tukaram's Gatha was thrown. That, when I was a young boy, I had visited that, and it was full of these great bhasir fish. Now, at least since last 20 years, the bhasir fish has completely gone. The Doha is in the grip of serious pollution. And what is being done? Well, what is being done is there is a Mobi Indrayani governmental project, and they pay a lot of money to some Japanese consultant to come and tell us about what to do with Indrayani. And then there is a lot of investment in various schemes. And what does that investment lead to? Let me just conclude by telling my experience in another context, the Namomi Ganga project. There has been this Namomi Ganga project also going on. And I have a good friend in Patna University, Ravindra Kumar. He has been very interested in the aquatic life on the Ganga, especially this Gangetic dolphin. So and he has been working with the local fishing people. I told him that one of my dreams is to actually spend the night sleeping on a sandbank by the Ganga River. After all, we hear so much from our childhood about Ganga and the sacred Ganga, and I very much would like to spend more time on Ganga and, as I said, spend the night on one of the sandbanks of Ganga. He said that is very easily arranged. I have some lot of fishermen friends who will take us in their launch on Ganga, and we will go upstream to where the Son River, I think it was, the Son River meets Ganga. There we will stop, spend the night, and the next day they will switch off the engines. Downstream we will just float leisurely. We did that. And I was, of course, very much interested. I was talking to the fishermen what was happening. The Ganga continues awfully polluted. There are every 10 kilometers or so on the Ganga sewage treatment plants. And what is happening to the sewage treatment plants? A lot of money is spent in setting up those plants, but there is no electricity to run them. So we actually saw also, and Ravindra Kumar, as I said, is constantly working there in that area. He says, yes, none of them operate because there is no electricity supply available to these sewage treatment plants. And a lot of money is spent, and the government will tell, oh, we invested 79,000 crores in treating pollution, the sewage which is flowing into Ganga, and all the 79,000 crores have gone down the drain because the sewage is not being treated. Of course, Pune River and our Bhima, there is all this kind of story we are also familiar with. And this is what with the Mobi Indrayani project will also be happening. So the fishermen said, with that, of course, the fish, which they love to fish, and the turtles, and then the dolphins. This is a very interesting animal. It is declared the national aquatic animal of India. They are all suffering badly. And with the declining fisheries, what can fishermen do? Well, the fishermen said that we have no other option left once we cannot obtain sufficient livelihood than to start mining the sand on the bottom of the Ganga River. And there is, of course, uh, law prohibiting sand mining in Ganga. They said, well, the law is there. And we saw actually with our eyes, as I said, as we went towards Son, that just outside Patna, about 10 kilometers from there onwards, sand was being mined regularly. And that sand which is being mined is, of course, used in the huge number of buildings and so on, which are coming all over that area and in the rest of our country. This is also happening. Vashelkarji in Goa, the Goanese fishermen have also told me that with the kind of destruction of the fish life in Goa with mines and various other problems, their next option is mining sand. So when you start mining sand, which is happening in Mandavi River, I have myself gone with the fishermen on Mandavi River in Goa. It not only now means less fish, but also the bottom dwelling cockles and mussels and so on, which are people are of course very fond of as very good food. They are also going off. So there is this multiplicity of ecological impacts with the climate change. And as I said, the impacts go spreading in various ways and because of various kinds of economic, administrative, political forces that are operating. Of course, we have to do something about it. I have no immediate solutions except that as a scientist, I can carefully document in specific detail what is going on, which I have been doing. And amongst other things, I must share with you, the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report, when it was released in 2011, the government wanted to suppress it and say it will not, should not be allowed to come out. Firstly, that it was anti-development. Okay, these are the developments which we had talked about, which are leading to all these landslides and killing huge number of people in India. And the second very interesting claim by the government was that the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report is against national security. I do not know how it was. When this case went to Delhi High Court, they ridiculed it. They said, what the hell? I mean, you don't want to release the report? Then give some decent rationale. Don't make such absurd claim that this report about the ecological situation on the Western Ghat is against national security. And they turned it down. So the report was released. Again, the government willy-nilly had to release it. It put it on its website. And of course, that was unfortunate as far as government was concerned. And it was put on the website in 2012 finally. And in 2015, it is removed. There is no, people cannot have access to the report. But fortunately, people now have access to information in different ways. And it is available on Internet archives. and people are reading it. Anyway, so these are how things are going on. As I said, as a scientist, all I can talk about is facts and what is happening. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. I greatly appreciate this occasion. And in terms of climate emergency, we have a great deal to ponder, think about. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, sir, for an inspiring session. I would like to now invite Dr. Professor Amitav Malik on stage to provide a token of appreciation to Dr. Madhav Garg. I would now like to invite Dr. R. Krishnan, Director of IITM, to address global warming and extreme challenges of climate change. Okay, sir. So this is the slide changer. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll just switch.
Yes.
So, Namaskar, good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank PIC and Professor Amitav Malik, Professor Mashelkar for this kind invitation. And so today, this morning, they have really set this stage. About climate change and global warming. So I'll quickly go through how global warming is causing these climate extremes, what are the challenges, and maybe some opportunities, whether we have some opportunities. That is something there is some hope. I saw that word hope in Professor Malik's talk. So that is something I want to briefly touch upon. And where there is some scope, we can address. It is not moving. So this is people have been, my predecessors have talked about this increase in the global mean temperature. For the first time in 2024, we exceeded the 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial level. And so this is very, very concerning. And from the IPCC report, this is the latest sixth assessment report. This warming, we know that it's all because of the human activities. So we cannot explain this warming trend, which the Earth's planet has warmed. We may say it's 1.5 degrees or 1.1 degree. But these models which are used, these are basically coming out from multiple climate models from different groups in the world, and our own model from IITM from India. First time it participated in the IPCC assessment report. So we can attribute this warming trend because of the human activities. Just the natural forcings alone, like changes in the solar irradiance or volcanic eruptions, they cannot give you this warming trend. So there's a very, very strong attribution that due to the increase in the carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide, which are greenhouse gases, which can trap the long wave radiation emitted by the planet, and they warm the planet. And so this warming trend is because of the human activities. And this is kind of unprecedented in the last 2000 years, the rate at which it has warmed. So these are very powerful messages. In addition to warming, which is coming by the greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, there are also aerosols, which Professor Gadgil, Madhav Gadgil mentioned. And these are basically particulate matter due to industrialization, transport, various activities. They have an opposite effect. They have kind of masked the warming due to the greenhouse gas, and they have kind of produced a cooling of about 0.4 degrees. This is until 2019. And if this masking of the cooling by the aerosols were not like sulfates or nitrates, and even some of the organic aerosols, the warming would have been much, much higher. And recently, many countries have adopted regulation norms in the emissions, especially North America, Europe, and more recently, China. And this aerosol, they are able to control. Why I am highlighting aerosol is it has a big implication on the monsoon and the water cycle. Next slide. Yeah. So totally, as I said, what do these greenhouse gases and all these pollutants that we are adding into the atmosphere, they basically trap the long wave radiation, the infrared radiation that is emitted by the Earth. And this we call it as effective radiative forcing. So they're putting a radiation perturbation on the planet, which warms up. Of course, aerosols, they have a kind of cooling impact. So, but we take the net, both the effects of the greenhouse gases as well as the aerosol. We have added about, the forcing is about 2.72 watts per meter squared. This is all estimated from the models and from the observations. And this much of additional energy has been added into the system. And so this is one of the slides from NOAA. It shows that the combined heating influence of all the greenhouse gases from 1980 to this up to 2019, the contribution coming from methane, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and so on. So much of the increase, about 45% increase in the greenhouse gases just during from 1990 to 2020 or so, we have added about 45% to the atmosphere, which has contributed to the additional heating imbalance. And and in the future, as it continues, these greenhouse gases have a very, very long lifetime. Carbon dioxide, once you introduce, it's a well-mixed gas, it is going to stay there for centuries, maybe 100, 200 years. So even if we cut down the emission today, the warming is going to continue. That is the problem. And so as we see, this is the temperature from 1950, global temperature to the present, and these are the projections. What we do in the IPCC is there are different scenarios we follow. If this kind of, for example, the SSP 115 is a kind of more sustainable scenario where these are all low emissions. 585 is a very highly unsustainable scenario, which is a very high emission scenario. And the 245 is a kind of middle of the road pathway. So when you follow these different trajectories, we estimate what is going to come out, what would be the mean temperature changes. All the modeling groups in the world do this, including our own group from IITM. And we can see that the 2-degree warming globally will be exceeded very soon, maybe in the coming decade or so, compared to the pre-industrial. And that is a big change. So unless we make rapid, deep reductions in the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, so the warming is going to accelerate. That is the main concern. And its impacts are going to be very profound. And this is the observed warming from the observed temperature records. Of course, much of the warming is happening in the high latitudes, the polar regions, and the mid latitudes. And this is what is simulated by all the models, the warming trend. They're mostly getting it very nicely. This is the observation, this is the model. And with further increase in the global warming at 1.5 degree global warming, 2 degree global warming, 4 degree, The pattern of warming is, they are going to increase in magnitude. Again, with the high latitudes, polar latitudes warming faster, even the tropics warming, tropics and the, so, and associated with this, the precipitation changes. Many areas, the precipitation will increase, rainfall will increase, and especially in the high and the mid latitudes. For us, the good thing is the monsoon rainfall will increase over India, over South Asia, over Africa, but also the variability will increase, not just the rainfall, year-to-year variations. So, and some of the dry areas like the Mediterranean, this Sahel, Sahara region, and also the Australian region. So they are dry subtropical areas. They are going to get drier. It is not that everywhere precipitation will increase. The monsoon variability will increase, rainfall. Also, its year-to-year variations will increase, and the dry areas will get drier. So that means you have more temperature will increase. If there is less rainfall, the soil moisture will be reduced. So there is much more decrease in the soil moisture. The evaporative demand will increase. So the agricultural droughts can increase in some of these areas. So, and as I said, the Arctic warming has been, Professor Malik mentioned this morning, it has been warming more than 4 times compared to the rest of the globe. Because as more and more ice melts, it is exposed, the surface is exposed, either the land surface or ocean surface. It can absorb more heating. It can take up, so temperature increase will be much faster because of the decrease in the reflectivity, decrease in the albedo. So it is going to absorb more radiation, and the warming is going to increase. And this is already happening in the Arctic. And this has going to be serious consequences as the Arctic starts melting. The Arctic ice cover has been declining. I think in the next 20, 30 years, maybe there will be times when the Arctic will be practically ice-free, at least in one or 2 times in a year. So the trend, these are all the observed trends. The September trend in the Arctic's rapid decline is already happening. And this is a big concern. And yeah, so this is the projection, future projection of the Arctic sea ice area. So there will be times, this is the time when Arctic will be practically ice-free, which you can start seeing right from the 2050s, many times in a year, and not the entire season, but if not many days in the season, you will see an Arctic which will not have ice. So this is a very, very serious concern. Other thing is the Greenland. This is one of the Greenland ice sheet. This has been losing a big ice mass, where the land ice has lost its mass. And substantially, when you look at the period 1992 to 2020, compare it with the previous period, it has almost lost about close to 5,000 gigatons of mass, which means a global sea level rise of about close to 13 to 14 millimeters. So because as you are going to melt this land ice, you are going to add extra mass into the ocean, the sea level is going to rise. And this morning, Professor Malik was already mentioning, so the sea level rise is going to be a big concern. And I'll show that in my next slide. So sea level rise can happen because of the warming, thermal expansion, and also due to the addition of glacial melt. Yeah, so these are the global inventories. We have added this extra amount of energy, which is going into the deeper layers of the ocean, not just the land and the surface and the ice. It is also going into the deeper layer of ocean, almost up to the 2,000 meters, how much the energy has been added. And what it has caused is the sea level has risen. So now if you see, this is the sea level change from during the period 1971 to 2018. And so the change is almost, we are seeing just during this 30, 40 year period, the sea level has increased by about 100 millimeters, about 10 centimeters. But if you take the entire century, the rise is about 30 centimeters. And in the future, these are the projections into the future. So even for the middle of the road pathway, the SSP 245, very likely we will cross the 0.5, that's half a meter of rise. This is in meters on the y-axis. So we will cross the half a meter global sea level rise, but in extreme scenarios, it could be even higher. That means all our coastal areas, if there is a cyclone or a storm surge, our coastal areas are highly vulnerable. I think that is, we have to keep in mind. Of course, there are uncertainties because especially we don't know what is happening in the Antarctic ice sheet, that there are deep uncertainties. I happen to be one of the coordinating lead authors in the water cycle chapter in the last assessment report, and with two other colleagues from France and New Zealand. And so we focused on the water cycle. Water is going to be one of the big concerns. And for us, we are endowed with this beautiful system known as the monsoon for the Indian region, one of the strongest monsoons, very important source of water. And there are also monsoon regions across the world over Africa, over East Asia, Australia, maritime continent, South America, and so on. So what we find is generally the aerosols increased from the 50s to the 90s. Entire Northern Hemisphere, I'm not just talking about India, or from North America, Europe. And aerosols have a different type of effect because they block the incoming solar radiation. For India, we say Adityat Jayati Vrishti. This is IMD's motto. That is the sun makes rainfall. Now, if you are blocking the solar radiation, we are not allowing enough radiation to reach the ground. So evaporation is going to be reduced from the ocean, from the land. So rainfall is going to decrease. And so now when we see, so due to the emissions of the aerosols, basically in the Northern Hemisphere, there was a reduction in the land precipitation, monsoon precipitation in many parts, including India and Asia. And now many countries have started cleaning it up. Of course, aerosols also have health impacts. I'm not going to that, but I'm just talking from the water cycle point of view. So this, because of the increased aerosol activity, land monsoon precipitation decreased. Now, especially due to regulation norms in North America and Europe, the air quality has improved, and there has been some recovery in the West African monsoon. And in addition, not just the aerosol, it's also coming because the global warming, as I said, greenhouse gas warming is continuing. In addition to that, aerosol reduction has happened. This has partly helped the West African monsoon recovery. But the Indian monsoon still continues to decrease. But recent times, there is a slight, from 2013 also, slight increase in the monsoon rainfall over India. So if we can reduce the aerosol emissions, now China has started doing that, probably the monsoons will, the Asian monsoon will improve precipitation, and we have an opportunity there. And with the global warming, of course, with global warming, monsoon is anyway going to increase. So whether we can conserve the water in the future during the 21st century, that is an important thing that we need to think about. There's an opportunity. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the temperature. What I'm showing is the fingerprint of the greenhouse gas forcing. And this is the fingerprint of the aerosol forcing. There are two different drivers. And this is the top panel is the temperature, bottom panel is the rainfall. So what aerosol temperature means, when greenhouse gas, they produce warming globally. As I said, of course, it is not uniform everywhere. Warming is more in the high latitudes, polar regions, and also over the tropics. But aerosols have a cooling. They tend to cool. And because of the emission regions are in North America, Europe, and now also China and Asian region, they try to counteract. And if you see the precipitation impact of the aerosol, if you're cutting down the radiation, this warming is happening in both the hemispheres. The aerosol tries to cool the northern hemisphere because that is where all the emission is there compared to the southern hemisphere. So there is more cooling in the northern hemisphere. So whatever, we can show that using theoretical arguments that if you cool one hemisphere relative to the other, the rain belt, the tropical rain belts, what we call as the intertropical convergence zone, that shifts south to the southern hemisphere. So it's really the large scale. So what we see is precipitation increases to the southern part, whereas parts in the Asian region and African region, rainfall will decrease because of the aerosols. So if we can control that, we have an opportunity. And as it is, the greenhouse gas is going to favor more rainfall, but also it is going to increase the year-to-year variability, especially in the subtropical areas where you can get more droughts. And we prepared an assessment report for our ministry, focusing, because the IPCC reports are all global in nature. In 2022, we produced a report for the Ministry of Earth Sciences, assessing what are the climate changes over the Indian region. I will not go into the detail. It is an open access publication. Anybody can download it freely. We compared for the past, what are the observed changes. And from the model, our own Earth system, IITM Earth system model, we examined what would be the temperature changes over India, precipitation changes, sea surface temperature in the northern Indian Ocean, sea level changes, Himalayan snow cover, and so on. I would encourage people to look at this. And one for India, we are really bestowed with this mighty orographic feature, the Himalayas. And assessment of the climate change over Himalaya is very, very important for us. It is the driver of one of the strongest monsoon systems on the globe. It is the source of 10 major Asian rivers. It is the largest reserve of ice outside the polar region. It's a biodiversity hotspot, and it has a diversity in culture, language, and tradition, which is a very, very important region for us. And it turns out from when you look at the observation, and this is from 1951 to 2016, I have plotted the temperature changes over variations, year-to-year variations over India and over Himalaya. So Himalaya is warming at a much, much faster rate. This is again a big concern. And so this means many of the ice-covered regions in the Himalayas, the Himalayan glaciers, they can melt, and they are a very important source of our water. So these are called the water towers of Asia. And many colleagues, including our good friend Kulkarni, Anil Kulkarni from IASC, they have studied the Himalayan. This was a science paper. Every year he goes there, makes these measurements of the glaciers in the Himalaya. And many glaciers in the Himalaya, they are losing mass, several of them, especially in the central and eastern Himalaya, except for the Karakoram region. Some of them we still don't understand. They have slightly gained mass because of the wintertime precipitation due to the westerlies, but most of them have been losing mass. And so this is a concern. And another important we have to keep in mind is, as the temperature is increasing, there will be more evaporation from the surface. And so there will be more water vapor. And water vapor itself is a greenhouse gas. It's one of the strongest greenhouse gases. It absorbs the long wave radiation, and it will amplify the warming. And I happen to work with Professor Suki Manabe, who got the 2021 Nobel Prize in physics for his pioneering contribution in global warming. He pointed out to the effect of the water vapor feedback. So it almost doubles the warming. And so one of the things is, as the temperature increases, there is a dependency of the saturation vapor pressure. So with every 1 degree rise in temperature, water vapor in the atmosphere will increase by 7% due to increased evaporation. This is very well known. So if water vapor increases so it will further amplify the warming. One of the direct consequences of this water vapor feedback is heavy rainfall will increase. Heavy precipitation, it also increases by 7% per degree warming. So globally, so every 1 degree warming means you are going to increase heavy precipitation by 7%. So just a minute. So in the future, so when I'm talking about extreme, with climate change, with global warming, temperatures, hot temperatures, very high, extreme temperature, something that happened once in 10 years is going to become at 1.5 degree warming. It will be it will become 4.1 times more frequent. And with 2 degree warming, it will be 5.6 times more frequent. So the frequency and also the intensity of the hot extremes will increase over land. Likewise, precipitation, heavy precipitation over land will also increase because of the additional water vapor. So that increases for 1 degree by almost 7%. For 2 degrees, it's about 14%. So heavy rainfall, heavy precipitation, what used to happen in a day will happen very quickly. So these heavy rainfall events will happen. So what does it mean for the monsoon? And so I thought I will show this wonderful, nice schematic, which I always like. We have this beautiful Indian subcontinent. We have the Himalayas, mighty Himalayas, the Tibetan Plateau, and the Indian Ocean to the south. And during the pre-monsoon months, the land gets heated up compared, because it has the heat capacity of the ocean is much, much higher. It can take more energy. It warms slowly, but the land warms faster. So it sets up a temperature gradient and then a pressure gradient. So you have high pressure over the ocean, low pressure over land. So the wind blows from the ocean to the land, and you have the effect of the Earth's rotation, what we call as the Coriolis force. You have what is known as the low-level flow, or the Somali jet, which is it's a boon for us. And you have the East African highlands, the mountains right on the equator. And I will not go into all these dynamics. And this channelizes the flow. This concentrates the flow of the Somali jet from the West Africa, these East African mountains. And there's a lot of huge amount of evaporation as the wind blows over the Arabian Sea. And this moisture-laden winds interact with the Western Ghat orography and also the Burmese mountains and also the Himalayas. So the water vapor rises, it carries the heat and the water vapor upward due to this convection. And as it goes to the lower pressure, the water vapor expands, it forms clouds, cumulus clouds, and we have the bountiful rain. We also know that these clouds, when they form, when the water vapor is condensing into clouds, it releases huge amount of latent heat of condensation, which intensifies, which acts as a feedback and strengthens the monsoon. So it's a beautiful coupled feedback between the wind and the rainfall. And it also affects the ocean biogeochemistry, because as the winds hit the East African mountains and go further eastwards, it also brings the cold waters from below, which are rich in nutrient, and that is important for the biogeochemical processes for the fisheries. So the entire bioecosystem, it is land, atmosphere, ocean, biogeochemical coupled system that's all interacting with this beautiful phenomenon. It's a complex system, and we can also study this chlorophyll, this algae that is coming from which is the source of the primary productivity, which is coming from the deep oceans below. And so now the question is, what will happen with global warming? And as I said, because of the increase in the water vapor in the atmosphere, extreme precipitation is going to increase. And but this is all, but we have to keep in mind, it is not just the water vapor. They are also linked to the circulation patterns that we see during the monsoon, like the low pressure systems, depressions, and so on. And we have seen several instances, and they are associated with various feedbacks. Climate change is also one of them. There are also large-scale teleconnections. I'll give some examples. Uttarakhand event we had in 2013, which was a heavy rainfall. Thousands of people died in these floods in that Kedarnath region. And there is also in Leh. Leh is in a very high altitude location. It's actually a cold desert. And but this region in 2010 got massive flooding. These are cloud bursts and basically mesoscale convective systems over the high terrain. And I'll also point to some heavy rainfall over Gujarat and Western India, what are known as the monsoon rainstorms. And 2022, Pakistan was devastated. And this was a upper Indus basin flooding and heavy rainfall also in 2010. So this region has been, quickly go through them, I will not take much time. This is the famous, so the climate change is happening globally, but impacts, we can see the impacts are regional. And this was the 2013 event. This was the famous Shiva statue in Rishikesh. This is after the flooding, huge amount of water that because of the flood, it was damaged. And of course, they have restored it back. And we examined several such cases, my colleague Vellur et al., similar to the 2013 event in Uttarakhand. It turns out that, this was a period this is in the upper, I will not go into the details. This is the circulation in the upper troposphere, about 12 kilometers, 13 kilometers in the monsoon regions, even deeper. And we have what is known as anticyclone. We call it as the Tibetan anticyclone. So it was a very early onset during 16 to 20, early monsoon onset. And there was a low pressure system that moved very quickly from the Bay of Bengal to this region. And there was also a very deep trough coming from the polar region. So this and the upper troposphere anticyclone was very active. It became unstable. So this was a tropical and extratropical interaction process. And you can see that the low pressure system from the Bay of Bengal is going. This is on 13th, 15th, and this is on 17th. And it is interacting with the extratropical air. And this is the water vapor that is from the satellite. We can see that the water vapor, a huge amount of water vapor is delivered into that region. So it is the combination of the circulation systems, weather patterns, and the water vapor that fuels these flood events. And this is a single day rainfall over several stations in the Uttarakhand region. Many stations, the one-day rainfall was more than 40 centimeter, 50 centimeter of rainfall in a day. And these are all, remember, in very high altitude stations. So the runoff is very strong and the flooding impact is very, very strong. I thought I will draw this attention. So water extremes are going to increase in future. Okay, sorry. This is the Leh flash flood that happened in 2010. And this was a very nice paper by the University of Washington. And actually, it's a dry region in the Leh. It's a high altitude terrain region, almost 3,500 meters above sea level. But torrential rains delivered this flood through a succession of mesoscale convective system. I'll quickly go through that. So basically what happened, this was 3rd August, 4th August, 5th August, a low pressure system is going, it is carrying the moisture. Meanwhile, what is happening is, these are the satellite images from what is known as Meteosat satellite. This is at 6 GMT, 12 GMT, and 20. So it is all on a single day. This is for 3rd August, this is for 4th August, this is for 5th August, for different times of the day. So what is happening is, during the daytime, the land is getting heated up over the Tibetan plateau. And as it is getting heated up, the convection develops. There's upward movement of the air, and these mesoscale convection systems slowly start moving westward. And then you have this flux of water vapor from the Bay of Bengal. And once the water vapor goes into this region, it can fuel this sudden development of this convective instability and this heavy flooding. I'll not, so this is the schematic. So from the Tibetan region, you have this deep convective elements, and then the moisture from the Bay of Bengal. So over this Leh region, you can trigger these big events. So I thought I'll just, I know these are a bit technical, but I thought I should. And yeah, in our own region, IITM, some of our colleagues have looked at the severe storms in India, and this was during 1941. This is a paper by Dar, Kulkarni, and Mandal. They looked at a severe storm of 90, which went from the Bay of Bengal, a low pressure system, what we call as the low pressure system or depression. And many times they go very far, and it can affect regions in Surat, Bombay, and this was disastrous. And one station almost got almost 90, close to a meter of rainfall, Dharampur. Such events are becoming strong. These monsoon synoptic, and this was the example I'm giving, 2024 August. Monsoon rainstorms, heavy rainstorms over Gujarat and Western India, 26 to 24. And in fact, IMD gave out this red alert. So IMD is doing a pretty good job nowadays, especially tropical cyclone. But the progress has been fantastic. Come after 2015, after the first, that Philene cyclone, it's not one cyclone after cyclone. They have done a tremendous job. Thanks, so they have improved really the early warning system. But challenges are this extreme rainfall. They suddenly develop, and that is where we are having the problem. Tropical cyclones, we are doing a good job. That's, I want to put it on a positive note. And there are some challenges. The tracks, they are getting very nicely. Intensity, there are still some issues. So thanks to the improved models, the high performance computing systems, and the huge amount of data that is going into it. So there has been developments. And of course, climate change is also making these events very, very extreme. And 2021, 2022, this was the extreme flooding it was devastation, big, massive devastation in the upper Indus basin of Pakistan. And so this was actually, it was not just a single, many studies are showing that this was an effect of climate change. And because if you see the pre-monsoon temperatures in many of those places, several places crossed more than 40 degrees, and Yaqubabad crossed 51 degrees. So the heat waves were very severe, pre-monsoon heat waves. It also led to the melting of the glaciers in the northern mountains. And as I said, with global warming, there can be more water holding capacity. There could be heavy downpours. And there was, of course, a monsoon depression, a low pressure system that was trigger for this event. But there could, in addition, there was a big, what we call as a La Nina event in the Pacific, where the Western Pacific was anomalously warm, where Central and Eastern Pacific were cooler. So that this also contributed. So it's a combined effect of so many drivers that is driving this. And this is the rainfall anomaly pattern. When I say anomaly, it's a difference pattern compared to the normal. You can see many areas in the Western India, even the upper Indus Basin, Pakistan, heavy rainfall, whereas China was reeling under drought, especially the Yangtze River Valley, which is very, very important for them. Yangtze River Valley got very deficit rainfall, anomalously dry, and so the temperatures went up in China. Here it was more cool, but here the heat waves continued in China. And these were all not affected, not only climate change, but also this pattern of this La Nina, where you have warm sea surface temperature in the Western Pacific and cool sea surface temperature in the Eastern Pacific. So these multiple drivers producing these extremes. So we wrote this paper very recently, that when we are talking about weather and climate extremes in the Asian region, it was a science-informed recommendations for policy, which I actually led for the WCRP. It was a concept paper. So we have to look at these extremes, not just from the local context. We have to take a much broader view. And the climate change is definitely an important player, but there are multiple drivers, and it is the integrated effect that leads to this compounded weather extremes. So because different components of the climate system are getting altered. Next. Another point I want to mention is the ground freshwater reservoirs, which we assessed in the IPCC. Many places there is the extraction of groundwater for irrigation. And especially over India, northern Punjab and Haryana, there has been a massive depletion in the groundwater. And this has become a big concern. Of course, not just over India, several other places, the groundwater extraction is a big concern. And some areas in the tropics, due to the increase in the precipitation, there has been a recharge in the ground, especially over the African region. But groundwater extraction is a big concern. So, by the way, this picture is based on the GRACE satellite, which basically measures, based on the gravity field measurements, you can estimate the water soil groundwater in the surface. And if the monsoon rainfall, if there is a year where there is less rainfall, like 2022 or 2023, Indo-Gangetic plain received very less rainfall. And also 23 was anomalously, it was a kind of normal, we could say, total season. But if you see spatial pattern, some areas, especially Indo-Gangetic plain and parts of Kerala and some of these areas in the Marathwada region and so on, rainfall was anomalously reduced. So if the rainfall is low and temperature is increasing, soil moisture will decrease. So the next monsoon, you can have very hot extreme with dry conditions, dry soil moisture. Again, the heat waves are going to increase. And another opportunity that I thought I should mention is this a nice paper from the IIT Bombay. They told that because of the groundwater extraction, they are telling that if we can switch the crops for water sustainability in India's food bowls, it can yield co-benefits for food security, for farmers' profit. So they are arguing because the groundwater irrigation extraction is so severe, and if you are using rice, because rice requires a lot of water, why not we replace rice with millets, pearl millets and sorghum in the Kharif season, and instead of from wheat to sorghum in the Rabi season, you are going to reduce the water consumption substantially by 32%, also improve the calorie production by 39%, and increase farmer profits by 40%. So I think we have to also come out with these innovative strategies. So you are not only conserving the water, but also improving the agricultural productivity, the farmer production, also the energy. So, and one more thing I did not mention in my talk. So we also found as the monsoons in the future are going to intensify, our own research shows that the low-level Somali jet and the winds are going to intensify. Probably there is an opportunity for enhancing our wind energy resources, which is so much in the Gujarat region and many places. So if the monsoon winds are projected to going to strengthen, and which we have seen in the last 10, 15 years, probably there is an opportunity to enhance our renewable energy, especially through the winds. So in summary, I say, of course, this human climate change is already happening and it is projected to, so the extremes are going already happening, heat waves, heavy precipitation, tropical cyclones, intensification, droughts and all. And we have much more understanding of that. And global warming is going to continue in the future. It will intensify the global water cycle. Not only the monsoon will increase, but also the variability, year-to-year variability will increase, and the severity of the wet and dry events. And for us, the Indian monsoon is projected to increase. That's a good news. But also the variability, we have to keep that in mind. So there is an opportunity. If the winds are also strengthening, we could use that an opportunity for our renewable energy. Can we do that for the wind energy? And that's a good news for the monsoons for South and Southeast Asia as well as the West Africa. Another concern is the groundwater depletion, Northwest India. I think this is a big concern. So can crop switching help in achieving water sustainability in India's football? I'm just putting this question. I think we should push this policy. Finally, we wrote a paper. Water still remains a blind spot when it comes to climate change policies. We are talking about 1 degree warming, 1.5 degree, 2 degree, but water has never got the attention that it really requires. For the first time in the 6th assessment report, both the working group 1 and working group 2 had a dedicated chapter on water. So we really, if we want to, for adaptation changes, for involving the policy makers, we have to close the loops, even for the mitigation options. Even if you want to mitigate, water becomes important. So adaptation, mitigation, everything, water is very central. I think that is a key point that I want to highlight. And with this, I will end my talk. Thank you very much.
I request Major General Nitin Gadkari, the Director of PIC, to kindly provide the token of appreciation to Dr. R. Krishnan. Amidst the enthusiasm and engagement earlier, I inadvertently missed giving a formal introduction to someone who truly deserved it. However, Dr. R. Krishnan is a distinguished climate scientist and a director of IITM Pune. With decades of expertise in climate modeling, he has been instrumental in advancing India's understanding of climate change. Under his leadership, IITM developed India's first Earth system model, which has made a significant contribution to the IPCC 6th assessment report. He has also co authored globally and internationally over 150 scientific papers. Thank you, Dr. Krishnan, for such an insightful session. Now, coming to the next address, which is by Dr. Ajit Ranade, a former VC of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, on impact of climate change on economy and possible solution. We are honored to have Dr. Ajit Ranade, a distinguished economist and a political analyst. He has made significant contributions in the field of economics, serving as a group executive president and chief economist of the Aditya Birla Group. He has been a columnist for several Indian newspapers, sharing insights on political and economic matters. He is also a co founder and trustee of the Association for Democratic Reforms, an organization committed to enhancing transparency in Indian politics. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ajit Ranade to share his perspectives on the economic dimensions of climate change.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And let me begin by thanking Professor Dr. Amitav Malik for inviting me to speak today. And of course, there are many others who have come here, very senior people, Dr. Marshalkar, of course, Dr. Gargil, Dr. Krishnan, General Patankar, and there are many others in the audience as well, very, what should I say, serious scholars and students of this issue. So my topic is, what I want to share with you are some thoughts about the economics of climate change or economics of the subject that we are discussing. And I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to say it because I have only about 15, 20 minutes, which I will try to use. So let me begin by taking some of the comments which were made earlier. So Dr. Marshalkar said, I hope he comes back because he stepped out. He said that, we gather here. So I'm thankful that all of you have come here on a Saturday morning. So before I forget, let me again wish all of you a very happy International Women's Day. I know a lot of women are very justifiably bothered that why should there be one Women's Day? So we should also celebrate one Men's Day. So with due caveat, I think since it's observed everywhere, I wish you all a happy International Women's Day, but also wish you a very happy, I think, 104th anniversary of the birth of a great poet of India, Sahir Ludhianvi. Because he was also born on 8th of March. And by the way, he's, of course, one of the most extraordinary poets who influenced our modern generations and also Hindi cinema, but also very fiercely strong feminist, if I can say so. So actually his birthday falling on Women's Day is not a coincidence, or perhaps it is a deliberate coincidence. So I want to start off by saying that Dr. Marshalkar said that we all assemble here and I want to hear new ideas. I don't want to hear the same thing again and again. So I want to slightly beg to differ with him that actually this topic is such that it bears repetition 100 times or 1,000 times. So it is okay to repeat the ideas again and again because this is such an important topic, and still if we don't see very concrete and visible behavioral change, then we just have to play the same tune until some change happens. As we heard from Dr. Krishnan, and I was going to mention that we have now 29 annual conferences, right? The COP, Committee of Parties, and 1990 is taken as a benchmark, by the way, that the CO2 emissions that we track, we take 1990, and the idea is to actually reduce our emissions or to below that level. So at least come down to that level or below that. That's the kind of general idea. But in fact, we are for 50% above. So not only have we not been able to reduce, but actually we are 50%, or he said 48% above. So actually it's going up. So it is important to keep on repeating, I think, so with due respect to Dr. Marshalkar, I think these kind of meetings and the indefatigable energy of Dr. Malik, that I've attended quite a few of his meetings, so it's very important. I know it's a Saturday, but these kind of meetings are important. That's first thing. Second is that this topic that we are discussing today, actually, in the previous talk by Dr. Krishnan, you saw a lot of science. So this topic has a lot of science, and but my job is to talk about the economics of it. But this topic is not only restricted to science or economics. It has politics, it has ethics, it has philosophy, and maybe if you think about broader things, demography, development policies. So actually, this is really cross-cutting in a really, true sense. So you can't say that this is only a scientific issue or this is only an economic issue. It's actually cross-cutting. So, and we need to make the dialogue or the or the messaging much more simpler, because to give you a current example, people nowadays discuss a lot is how is AI, tell us how is AI going to affect us. A few years ago, we used to ask, how is climate change going to affect us? So if I ask you, how is AI going to affect, artificial intelligence, how is it going to affect us? So a very good answer to that somebody gave recently was, think of AI as internet. There was a time 20, 30 years ago, we used to say, Acha, internet, how is it going to affect us? But now internet is part of our life. Internet is a way of life. Or, similarly, AI is going to be very soon a part of our life. So same thing, climate change, we say, how is climate change going to affect us? Actually, unless we make it as a part of our life, day-to-day living or scholarship or activities, economics, the economic policy, that's where we should be headed to. So I'm going to try and present some ideas to you to convince you about how we can go ahead. I mean, what is involved. I'm going to make a series of comments. So it is not, I'm not trying to present to you a coherent theory. I just now said, in artificial intelligence, like internet, climate change, these are not just isolated topics to be studied. I think this is supposed to become part of our day-to-day economic life and scholarship and policies. So what I want to say, that's the takeaway. Okay, if there's one takeaway from my 20 minutes is that it used to be the case that say in a company you present the budget target for next year, and then slowly they started adding an annexure. So what is the carbon footprint impact of your profit making next year? Similarly, in the union budget, we keep saying this is the budget presented by the government, and there's going to be one chapter on green budgeting, or maybe one chapter on gender budgeting. So long as it's just an annexure, and that's not. I would think what I'm trying to say is that everything has to become mainstream. So there will come a time, and I'm optimistic about it, that it will become mainstream. So Dr. Marshilkar, since you have come here, I just wanted to mention, please, that I began by saying that I beg to differ one comment of yours. Since you have come, please allow me to repeat what I said. That you began, yes, I know. It was, yes, only one. That you somewhere in your initial comment, you said that we are gathered here for new ideas. I don't want to hear the same ideas again and again and again. But in this particular context, I want to say that there is no end to the number of times we need to repeat this message until it becomes ingrained in our day-to-day living, our policy making, and our scholarship and our understanding. So we have been saying this for a long time, but we need to just keep on repeating this message. But I'll explain to you offline what I had to say to justify my differing with you. I also want to say, why is it that despite repetitions, there is so much talk when the scientists and people like this environment, like my friend Dr. Gurdas Nulkar, when they all assemble here, there's a lot of spook talk. Doomsday is coming. Yes, spook, everything is a gloomy picture. And still, a lot of people are just, they just shrug their shoulders. Yeah, look, after some time, you will lose credibility. So many times I've said. So there is a reason for this. First of all, with now the current president in the United States, there are a lot of people who are in his team who are very skeptical. But I'm going back to a few years back, 5 years ago, COVID. So when we early days of COVID, no less a publication than the New York Times said that the discovery or the synthesis of the COVID vaccine is going to take at least 10 years. And then therefore beyond that, the dissemination and the distribution. But they were proved hopelessly wrong. We can try and analyze why were they so wrong. But their prediction was disproved very quickly. And we have a fantastic success story about, we can debate how many people died and what could have been avoidable and all these very harsh lockdowns. Was the policy not unnecessarily harsh, and did we not kill livelihoods because of it? But that's not my point. My point is, if mainstream publications like New York Times and many others gave us this spook story, and they were disproved very quickly. If you are not convinced of that, let me give you another example, which is a few years ago. There is something called the Club of Rome. Club of Rome made a prediction that the Earth, the planet, is going to run out of resources very quickly, in a few decades, or by the end of 1990s, I think, or by the end of this. And they were following the tradition. The Club of Rome was a collection of, I think, eminent scientists and economists and sociologists. And they were following in the tradition of Malthus, the great Thomas Malthus, who made this famous, if you know his idea, Malthusian economics. So Malthusian idea is that resources will grow arithmetically, but demand will grow geometrically, and we will run out of resources. So this was the Club of Rome prediction. But as you know, I'll not go through most of the details, but there is a very famous bet. So I'll just read it out to you. So there is a famous bet between Julian Simon, a professor, business professor, economics professor, pardon me, you can say from my gang, and a biologist, Paul Ehrlich, very eminent biologist called Paul Ehrlich. He said, Julian Simon challenged him that we will bet. So because Paul Ehrlich, in the same tradition of the environmentalists today, I'm just saying factually, I'm not trying to pass any value judgment, but Paul Ehrlich kept on saying about the resource scarcity in the decade leading to 1990. And this was, there's a lot of debate going on. And so Simon challenged Ehrlich to choose a raw material that he wanted and a date more than a year away, because he's making a prediction, and that he would bet that the prices of that resource will actually come down, not increase. So it was given to Paul Ehrlich, this scientist. You choose. Tumi choose kara. Aap choose kijiye, and we'll find out what happens. And therefore, Mr. Ehrlich chose copper, chromium, nickel, tin, and tungsten. The bet was made on September 29, 1980. And September 29, 1990 was the payoff date. So you and I make a bet. You are the scarcity spooker. I said, nahi, aapka prediction galat hai. And we make a bet, and 10 years later, we'll see who's right. So it's not 100 years, because we keep, as I said, I have to keep saying, with due respect to all of you, all these predictions, 2100 mein aisa hoga, and pralay atal hai, pralay is coming. So we have, instead of making a 100-year bet when both of us want to be there, this bet was made only for 10 years, right? And indeed, you know what happened? I mean, you know all this, right? What happened was that Mr. Ehrlich lost the bet, and all 5 commodities that they bet in 1980, the price had declined. So this is fact. At a time when we're living in inflation, you might find it a little odd. But the same thing is about food prices. The Club of Rome said there's going to be food scarcity. Actually, food prices have come down, much to the dismay of the African continent, which were exporters of primary commodities and food products. So countries which depend on export of primary commodities, it's bad news for them when commodity prices go down. But that's the story. Not even a gram of chocolate grows anywhere in Europe, as far as I know, or in America. We never associate chocolate. It's always Swiss chocolate and Belgian chocolate and whatnot, Austrian chocolate and American. But all the cocoa comes from Africa. So cocoa prices never seem to go up. But chocolate prices are always becoming premium. So anyway, so that's I just want to caution you that we are doing all this prediction. I'm not here, by the way, to doubt all this science behind climate change. I'm just saying that because we have to find out, this is going back to Dr. Marshall's comment, why is it that the people at large, we are not able to, I mean, we have come a long way. From 1992 was the first Rio summit. So we are now 30 years later, 33 years later, we have come a long way. We have announced net zero. We have achieved, I think, 100 gigawatts of renewable energy, and ambition is to go to 500 gigawatts in the next 5 years. So we have achieved quite a bit, but still, there are these problems that the biggest, richest country in the world walks out of Paris Agreement. They're walking out of WHO. They're going to, so why is it that it's happening today? So that's one thing I wanted to, I started by saying that firstly, it's not only science, it's science, economics, politics, development policy, demography, everything. Second is that we have to be careful about these predictions, and we have to find out ways how to convince people about behavioral. And therefore, when we talk about ozone layer and CO2 and all, I think I submit to you that the local reality is much more important. Thirdly, this goes to comments made by Professor Gadgil, because he told us about how 70,000 crores had gone down the drain, and how the mining interest, coal mining in Goa, or sand mining in the Ganga, or the nuclear power reactor coming up supposedly in Jaitapur. So you're saying he was kind of making a reference to the commercial, commercial and business interests, economic interests, if I can call them. And they seem to come in the way when we are trying to do this climate change mitigation or climate change enlightened and somewhat, more scientific, more rational policies. So I don't know. The message I was getting is that ultimately these business profits and short-termism, somebody said, I think Dr. Malik said, this quarterly profit obsession. So, but I want to caution you that this is the world we live in. And again, I want to quote somebody slightly out of context, but it's relevant, that there is one gentleman called R.F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, the same name as the late Robert Kennedy. He is now the Secretary of Health, if I'm not mistaken, in America. And he's a very strong, of course, supporter of President Trump. But just last year, I think, before President Trump got elected, he made a very, very, very frank, very famous speech. It's on YouTube. And he was saying that America is giving 180 or $200 billion to Ukraine. Where is it going? Why is it? So he said that the real reason is because this money, and this is on record. Mitch McConnell, I think the Speaker of their Parliament, was on record as having said that this money is actually, don't think of it as it's going to Ukrainian. It's not down the drain, because it's helping these companies, American companies. Which are these companies? Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics. Who are these? Defense manufacturers. So you Americans, don't worry. This money is not going away. That's why they were supporting. I mean, this is RFK saying it, okay? Robert Kennedy, who's now the secretary, their health minister. And then he said, okay, then just to make it sweeter, what do? That they said this money is going to Ukraine, but it's not a grant, it's not a subsidy, defense, but we are going to give it as a loan. Why should we use the loan language? By the way, it was before Trump got elected, so this is the Biden administration. Why do we use the loan language? Because then it's going to be, you think that it's going to be repaid. Do you think it's going to be repaid? Of course not. Ukraine is going to be devastated. Is they not going to repay? So what happens? Well, we will ask our pound of flesh. We will ask for their resources. Guess what? Mr. Trump is continuing that Biden strategy. So we want your rare earths, we want your minerals, we want your land. So the deal is already done. Apparently, see, Ukraine is the wheat basket of Europe. I think 30-40% of wheat is produced. It's an agricultural food basket. Forget about all the rare earths and minerals. So 30% of agricultural land, apparently wheat producing land, has already been, the papers have been signed that they're going to be transferred to American owners. Who are the owners? Companies like Cargill, Monsanto, and which is the other company? DuPont. Please take my comments in the context of what Mr. Gadgil said. Okay, I'm not. So I just want to relate to you. And who are these companies? Whether it's General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, or DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto, they are on. RFK says, I'm just quoting. Robert Kennedy says they are all owned by BlackRock. Now you'll say, who is BlackRock? Anybody know who's BlackRock? BlackRock is the world's largest mutual fund. Just like you may have ICICI Mutual Fund and Reliance Mutual Fund and Nippon, there is a mutual fund called BlackRock. It's the world's largest. It's $12 trillion. So who owns the mutual fund? It's American public. It's an equity investing public. So you see how they what I'm trying to say is there is so much interconnection. So now you're trying to point fingers. It's Boeing. No, it's BlackRock. No, it's American public. You see the economic interest. What I want to say is that while we are talking about this climate change impact, all this disaster scenario, it's so interconnected. We live in a world which is extremely interconnected, interdependent, interrelated. So now you can't say that the American public is the villain, because they are the ultimate equity owners of mutual fund by BlackRock. The chairman is Larry Fink. He's a very close friend of Trump, I'm sure. But it's not, he's just a mutual fund. A mutual fund holds it in trust. They're called trustees. And who are the mutual fund investors? They are American public, at least tens of millions of people. So you see how this Ukraine thing. So I'm drawing that analogy with climate change. So when we look at the economics of climate change, I want you to understand and appreciate this interdependence, interrelatedness. And therefore, we come to my next point, that when we are talking about economics of climate change, there are two issues here. there are two issues when we discuss climate change and economic. There's basically prices or the incentive price effect, and there's externality. So on the price thing, I will just postpone the discussion. If there's time, we'll come to it. But I want to focus basically on the externality aspect. Climate change is what in economics we call the effect of externality. That is, if a company is producing, say, an industrial product, then it is letting some pollution into the atmosphere or some effluents into the river. And that is something that it is not bearing the cost. As cost of production, when you put money in, when you put your effluent in the Bhima River, so what do we do? So that is the source of our local pollution. Eventually, even carbon, greenhouse gases in the environment is because we are, for example, a country like India. India is it's number third, right? You said it's the third largest producer of carbon greenhouse gases. First is China now, second is America, and third is India, not very far behind. So why is that? Because 60% of our energy that we use, the lights which are running in this auditorium, the microphone here that I'm speaking, my mobile phone, all these are getting charged by energy. And that 60% of that commercial energy is coming from burning fossil fuels. That's a reality. And India is still not, despite our ambition to get to whatever, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, today, the reality is 60% is coming from fossil fuels. So we are major contributors to this greenhouse gases. Same thing with industrial effluents and air quality index. You know, they say that something like 90% of humanity, this is a shocking number. 90% of humanity today breathes polluted air. I should be speaking with a mask here. That's the reality. 55% of the world's population is already urbanized. Urban air is not so this I just want to dwell on this externality bit. What is externality? Externality means you do an economic activity and there are unintended consequences of it on somebody else, which that somebody else is bearing the cost. Typically, it's not bearing the benefit, but bearing the cost. And you don't pay. So they say, how do you fix this? So by the way, one example of externality is that when I stand here in front of you, I inhale oxygen, hopefully, O2, and I exhale CO2. So even when I stand here, I'm imposing an externality. Every second, every few seconds, there is CO2 coming out of my... So all of us are doing that. In fact, they say that for a human being, if you remove the impact of my clothing or my other activities, just the fact of being an alive human being, in a lifetime, my contribution is going to be 14 trees, right? Because trees and plants, they take in CO2 and they exhale oxygen. So if you're worried about greenhouse gases and CO2, one of the major contributors are this 9 billion people, human beings. So each human being, they estimate, is about 14 trees. So if we want to neutralize at least just merely breathing and carbon impact of human beings, you need 140 billion trees to be planted. So these are all macro numbers. Does it bother us? Well, it's not so simple, because if you live in Utrud or maybe in Dharavi or somewhere on Chandni Chowk in not Chandani Chowk but Chandni Chowk of Delhi, then it is so congested that this externality will start becoming real, because otherwise it's negligible. If you live in Canada, so the population density is that one person in maybe 10 square kilometers. So it is not the scientific fact that there's an externality is correct, but when it comes to the economics of it, it matters what is the population density. So therefore, when we urbanize, we increase the population density. That's when these problems start becoming visible and real, and they start affecting us, and then we start responding. And so what do we do then? By the way, we keep saying that India is a high population density, but Netherlands has, I think, something like twice of India's population density. We never think of Netherlands as a highly polluted country. It's highly urbanized. It's 90% urbanized. India is only 35% urbanized. But we never think of Netherlands as a highly polluted country with very, very high AQI. In fact, the interesting thing, I just randomly chose the Netherlands because it's quite a congested, not congested, it's a country with high population density. It's actually more than Bangladesh or something. Why did I choose, why am I thinking of Netherlands? Because Netherlands area is 1/80th of India. So India's land mass is 80 times of Netherlands. And guess what is Netherlands? Agriculture production, not just agriculture. Their fruits, vegetables, and food grains. The value of that is 3 times of India. So India exports, sorry, agriculture exports, not production, but exports. So production is even more. India's exports are $40 billion annually. Today, this year, Netherlands is 120 billion, 123 billion. So what is it they're doing? Is there something that we can learn from them? They're more congested than us, quote unquote, that is higher population density. Their land mass is 1/80th, and their exports are 3 times, agriculture exports. So it's the economics, how the economics works along with incentives. So so basically, what we think about what do you think about externalities that we propose solutions. So we say that there should be taxes, there should be penalties. Then for example, when I said the factory has a smokestack, then a few years later we introduced legislation called scrubbers. So you scrub the sulfur dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So you have to install those scrubbers. So these are all requirements, legislative requirements. But as Dr. Gargil also told us, when it comes to, then we do carbon trading, then we do emission caps. Or for example, in Mumbai city, the government is proposing congestion pricing. So if you drive into the city, say you go to South Bombay, you'll have to start paying. I don't know how they're going to enforce it, but basically, so we think that by enforcing pricing and penalties, we will the economics will curb the externality. Think of climate change as externality. But Dr. Gargil also told us we have all these rules, but enforcement is not strong at all. So we can't, in a country like India, you can't just say that, oh, let's make a rule that carbon taxes will be $20 a ton or $15 a ton. But where is the enforcement? So without enforcement, without a strong capacity of government capacity for strict enforcement, we cannot actually just depend on rules. So I'm just to give a contrary example, a country like Sweden, you know how much garbage they recycle? Country like Sweden, what percentage of their garbage is recycled? The answer is 110. Why is it more than 100? Because they import garbage. So actually, they are desperately looking for garbage. They incinerate all of the garbage, but so the trucks have to go from Germany and some other countries. They have to import from sometimes Russia also. So they are a country which is importing so much to learn from them. How do they do? I give you the example of Netherlands. I'm giving you the example of Sweden. But behind all this, please remember, if you see those videos, if you go to Sweden, it's a very elaborate system. So it is very sophisticated, very polished, very elaborate, but it hides the fact that it's very capital intensive also. Even the agriculture in Netherlands, even the packaging of their cabbage or their lettuce or their fruits or their tulips, it's the automated, very shiny, aluminum clean lines, like, dust free, but it hides a lot of capital intensity. Can India afford that? Of course not. And are we able, I mean, is it hiding something else? The aluminum has to come from somewhere else. It's produced maybe by Alcoa, by burning fossil fuel. So that is not there visible in Netherlands. So similarly, the Swedish fantastic story of, recycling 110% of the garbage is the incinerators. They're made from metal. Where did the metals come from? So we have to take a much more holistic. So what happens is that when you start talking about externalities and way of looking at it holistically, this environmental and climate change subject forces you to think in much more holistic terms. At some point, actually, I'm going to run out of time quickly. At some point, you got to start thinking, should we now also start advocating lower growth? It seems like a shocking and a completely heretical thing to say that well, it's not new. I mean, I think at least the great M.K. Gandhi has said it, or maybe other people. The person who wrote that book, Small is Beautiful, or go back to Henry David Thoreau, or people of, even before that is it that we have to now think about that we have to reduce our ideas of economic growth. We have to reduce our ideas of per capita consumption. We have to reduce, so It's so that is something that we among all the ideas that we present here, that we need to have better taxation, carbon trading, more incentives, penalties, punishments. But also, can we start talking about that perhaps we need to think totally different way of thinking about development, which actually means reducing levels, not just not growing, not just growing at 0%. One good example of that is the country called Japan. Today, Japan is the fourth richest country in the world in terms of aggregate GDP. Number one is America. Number two is China, very closely number two. Number three is Japan. Number four is Germany. Number five is India. India is going to overtake Germany, they say, very soon. So Japan is third richest country in terms of aggregate GDP. There are only 110 million people there, less than Bangladesh, less than 1/10 of India. What has been their GDP growth rate in the last 35 years since 1990? Answer is zero. Average GDP growth rate over the 35-year period is just about zero, maybe 0.3, 0.1. Per capita income has been rising. Why? Per capita income is GDP divided by the denominator. The denominator is shrinking. Every year there are 1 lakh fewer Japanese. What happens to them? Well, what else is about this country? Highest life expectancy in the world, among the highest, among the major economies, is something like 90. Lowest incidence of obesity. Highest forest cover, green cover. Highest rainfall. This is the third richest country in the world. And of course, leaders in miniaturization, leaders in technology, leaders in various things. So there is something to be learned from them. They have been growing at 0%. But you can say, oh, it's okay for them. They are so rich, they can afford to grow at zero. But that's the change in paradigm I'm suggesting to you, that can we think about new paradigms where actually growth doesn't become the sole focal point. And here I want to suggest, and I've said this earlier also, that we have to start thinking in terms of not economic efficiency, but also this, when you talk about externalities, climate change and global warming, you have to start talking about issues like justice, fairness. Are we not, when we expand, when we are using more than what the capacity to bear of this ecosystem, it's actually destroying something which is not going to be available to the future generations. So I think Dr. Malik got a little emotional that when he looks at children, young people, but Dr. Malik has not seen even the unborn people. There are a lot of people who are unborn. They're yet to be born. So that language to use, I think, is chori. The most stark language is ki chori. We are stealing from them. When you overuse the ecosystem or ecological footprint, we are actually stealing from unborn people. They don't have a voice, they don't have a vote, they're not around, you can't see them suffering, but we are already stealing from them. This is very easy to explain in the context of economics. When you have a fiscal deficit, the government is spending more than it's earning. Where does the deficit come from? Where does this extra spending come from? By borrowing. Who are you borrowing from? The taxpayers. No, not just the taxpayers, the unborn people, because the tax burden is going to be passed on to the new generation. India's debt to GDP ratio today, total aggregate debt is about 300 trillion rupees, 300 lakh crores. Is it going to be repaid? No, this is next generation, it will be 320. So therefore, debt burden is increasing. And wo boza to doke aur kona chahiye, wo doke rehto hai. On whose head? The people who are not even born, those suckers, unko kya pata kitna tax badhne wala hai. Same thing, it's easier to understand in fiscal level. Same thing about ecological deficit. You're stealing. So therefore, you have to now start bringing from economic efficiency and economics of penalties and incentives and subsidies, you have to bring in ideas of justice, of fairness, of ethics, of empathy, because you have to have empathy for those unborn children. Otherwise, if I don't care, if I don't know who they are, I don't care. Empathy, and may I say, with some trepidation, morality and spirituality. I know I'm just venturing into very delicate, dangerous territory, but economics is completely silent on these issues. Economics has nothing to say about ethics. I'm taking permission from my profession that the textbooks will not say much. They have nothing to say about it. What is just, what is unjust, what is fair, what is unfair, what is moral, what is immoral. The morality comes from religion. By the way, I want to distinguish between religiosity and morality can be summed up in one language. Sorry, one sentence. So it's a statement from the Bible, but it's very simple. वो छोटे राजू को भी, छोटे रीता को भी समझता है. Do unto others as you them do to you. तुझ्या हातातनं खेचून घेतलं चॉकलेट चालेल का तुला? So don't snatch the chocolate from your friend. So same thing. It's just that's morality. So we have to bring in this concept when you talk about climate change. That you have to bring in your discourse. So I'm going to now conclude by saying that well, there's lots of things to say, but let me summarize by saying that there are top 10 environmental issues in the world, and these are greenhouse gas, carbon, for want of a better word, short form, we say carbon dioxide, but we mean climate, I mean, global warming. It has, as Dr. Krishnan told us, it has increased by 48% since 1990. Then air quality index, AQI, I told you, 90% of humanity lives with polluted air. So Delhi people, you're not alone. Number 3, oceans. That we talk about microplastics. Oh, sorry, I forgot to read out. Anyway, there's so many things to say, but this microplastics, I have to say something that, in the Southern Pacific, there is a patch of land which is called the Great Pacific Garbage, I think it's called. Have you heard of this? The area of that is it's about 1.6 square kilometers. Sorry, 1.6 million square kilometers. It's bigger than twice the size of Texas. But let me just read out. Despite the common public perception of this patch, it's expanding, okay? This huge garbage floating in the oceans. Despite the common public perception of the patch existing as a giant island of floating garbage, actually its density is very, very low. It's only 4 particles per cubic meter. So therefore, it prevents detection by satellite imagery. And even by casual boaters or divers, they don't see it. It's invisible. This is because the patch is widely dispersed in an area consisting primarily of suspended fingernail-sized or smaller microscopic particles. That's what we call microplastics. Who knows how much of it is coming into our food chain? Or it has already not coming, has come and gone. I mean, we are all part of it. And so that's the number 3. So carbon dioxide, air quality, oceans, energy. I told you 60% of India's energy is coming from fossil fuels. Then 5th is food. Can we sustain, when we say India, we always, economists like to predict or forecast what is our food demand. This year we have produced 300 million tons. Our population is growing at this percent. Our changing food patterns, we are cooking less at home, going to restaurants. There's more processed food, more pizzas being eaten, and so on. So food demand projection. But uska kya matlab hai? So we say that India's demand for food grain is going to increase at a faster rate because more people are now eating outside, which is a fact, and more it's going from coarse cereal to fine cereal. It's going more towards processed food. More importantly, it's going more towards non-vegetarian. So now we need to produce corn or wheat or feedstock, not only to feed the human beings, but to feed the cattle which will be eaten by the human beings. So it's a exponential growth. So therefore, this is the 5th problem, the food challenge. It all affects, do we need to now start advocating more plant-based food? I know, there'll be the, religiously forward vegetarians and non-veg. This is not the debate I want to start. But this is, if you want to talk about climate change, you can't escape this issue. That should we now advocate plant-based food rather than building a lot of food to be eaten by animals, to be eaten by, I don't know, biodiversity, urbanization, I mentioned, water scarcity. India is already water scarce. They say how much it is, what is the definition? It is for 1,000 meter cube per person or something like that. So India is already a water-stressed country. So let me repeat, carbon dioxide, air quality index, oceans, energy, food, biodiversity, urbanization, water scarcity, meteorological, which Dr. Krishnan said, and finally, population and waste. So population itself, and I know this is a very, very big area to discuss whether population is a good thing or a bad thing. Is it a boon or a bane? We started by saying hum do, hamare do. For 40 years, we did this family planning campaign. And now, of course, you heard Mr. Stalin and others saying, why are we being punished? Because delimitation means we lose parliament. But in the same time, the other chief minister of Andhra Pradesh saying, no, you have to produce at least 3 children or 4 or maybe 5. Singapore. So, but population also is something we need to think about. So these are, I would like to submit by ending by saying that these are issues which will affect. So that I did not discuss climate change in a narrow context about 2-degree heating and so on. It has to be thought about holistically, and we have to go into ideas which are far beyond just economic efficiency and incentives, including ideas we have to bring into the discourse of ideas of justice, fairness, and morality. Thank you very much. I've taken too long. Thank you.
Uh, I would kindly request Professor Amitav, sorry, I'm so sorry. Director Major General Nitin Gadkari to please present a token of appreciation to Dr. Ajit Ranade, sir. Uh, Distinguished and esteemed guests and panelists, kindly proceed for the lunch. It has been served outside. We are announcing a lunch break right now. Please. The panel discussion will be post lunch.